Have you noticed any less than beautiful tomatoes in your garden? Let's talk about some of the reasons why your tomatoes might look a little bit weird, and also which ones are still safe to eat. First, let's talk about blemishes that are superficial. These conditions largely only impact the look of the tomato. And if you can see past their homeliness, at the end of the day, you'll still have delicious tomatoes on your plate. If you're growing large slicers, like big beef, Cherokee purple, or Brandywine, you might notice that your earliest fruits look super lumpy or craggy on the bottom. And it's easy to see this and panic. It's not really a great sign out of the gate as the growing season is starting to ramp up. But don't panic. If your tomatoes are starting to look like this on the bottom, they have a condition called catfacing, which is absolutely harmless and perfectly normal for your earliest harvest of tomatoes. And because it largely only impacts the earliest of harvests, it's thought that the colder temperatures at the beginning of the season are the cause of catfacing. If you transplant your tomatoes and they end up being exposed to temperatures below 50 degrees Fahrenheit or 10 degrees Celsius, you're more likely to see catfacing on your large slicing tomatoes. The way to manage catfacing is to delay transplanting outside until the ambient and soil temperatures are more favorable for your tomatoes. Now keep in mind, this also includes the hardening off process. If you were to bring your tomatoes outdoors to harden off and the overnight temperatures were still a little bit too chilly, you still might end up seeing some catfacing on your earliest tomatoes. Because of the deep crevices, when it comes to harvesting my cat-faced tomatoes, I tend to harvest them a little bit earlier. I'll actually pick them around first blush, and I'll bring them indoors to help them ripen under controlled conditions. While the lumps aren't really an issue, there are still some crevices and some crags that you can't see deeply into. And sometimes these can split open. And if they split open and they stay on the vine outside, that invites pests and disease. And again, this condition is perfectly safe. So once your tomatoes are fully ripened, you can eat them with confidence. If you feel a little bit weird about eating the tough skin on the bottom, you can always just cut it off or eat around it. Another weird looking condition you might see on your tomatoes is called zippering or stitching. Now this looks exactly like it sounds, a long scar which resembles a zipper extending from the stem down toward the blossom end of the tomato. Zippering is caused when the flower anther, the part of the stamen that contains the pollen, sticks to the fruit as the fruit is developing. Zippering is also a condition, like catfacing, that is caused by cooler weather. It's also perfectly safe and absolutely edible. The way to manage zippering is to either just grow some varieties that are less prone to the condition, like cherry or grape tomatoes or some varieties of paste tomatoes, or treat it like with catfacing, where you're not transplanting it too early so as to avoid exposing your plants to cooler weather. Probably the most aesthetically challenging thing I see on my tomatoes from season to season are called growth cracks, also called rain checking. Cracks in tomatoes are caused by explosive fruit growth. Now that can sound like a good thing. Who doesn't want their tomatoes to grow super quickly? But the issue actually arises when the inside of the tomato grows faster than the outside, and inelasticity of the skin as the tomato swells causes it to split and crack. This is prone to happening, especially in hot drought conditions that are followed by a good bit of rain. This is why you should also take care not to overwater your plants in the heat. Make sure you're consistent in watering your plants and not letting them get too thirsty between drinks. Inconsistent watering could cause your fruits to swell up too quickly and split the skin. Now again, this is purely cosmetic. Your cracked tomatoes are perfectly edible, but I would recommend that you pick them sooner rather than later, before they fully ripen. The cracks can sometimes get so deep that they can potentially expose the inside of the tomato, which will cause issues with shelf life and also will invite pest and disease if left to ripen on the vine. Now, some tomato blemishes are more than superficial, whether they're caused by rot, disease, or pests. And whereas with things like catfacing, cracking, and zippering, you can still eat your tomatoes, some of these next conditions will absolutely render your tomatoes inedible. A question I get a lot is simply, what is happening to my tomato? And almost without fail, when I get that question, I can easily predict that the picture I'm going to receive outlining the issue is a picture of a tomato growing on a vine. It looks like it's developing super nicely, except for this weird black or brown spot on the bottom. This is blossom end rot, one of the most common tomato disorders for home gardeners. Most often impacting the first sets of fruit, blossom end rot is caused by a calcium deficiency in your plant. But as odd as it sounds, that doesn't necessarily mean that your soil is lacking adequate calcium. Rather, it's possible that your plants are being impacted by outside influences that keep it from being able to absorb the calcium in the soil. Moisture fluctuation, over-application of nitrogen-heavy fertilizer, damage to the roots, and hot weather can all be contributing factors to blossom end rot. To manage blossom end rot, try keeping your soil consistently moist, not letting it dry out between waterings. Mulch can help with moisture retention and can also keep you from having to water too often. You can also run a soil test to check the nutrition in your soil and fertilize based on the results. And if you're planting anything near your tomatoes, make sure you're not digging too closely to the plant so as to not disturb the roots. If you notice blossom end rot, chances are the affected tomatoes aren't going to be big enough for you to need to worry about salvaging them. I did read in some educational sources that if the fruit is large enough and ripened, you can remove it from the vine, cut out the blackened part and eat it, but I find it's not worth it. I just remove these impacted tomatoes and move on. When it comes to hot weather, did you know that your tomatoes are capable of getting a sunburn? Actually called Sunscald. This is a condition that can happen when your tomatoes spend too much time in direct sunlight. Even though they're mainstays in the summer garden, tomatoes, specifically their fruit, can actually get too much sun. And if that happens, blisters can form on the skin, causing a white or yellow discoloration, or even a breach of the skin itself. And the most common cause of sunscald is when your tomatoes don't get enough shade from foliage on the plant. Too much direct sunlight on particularly bright days can burn the surface of your fruit. To manage this condition, check out the amount of leaves you have on your plants. Does it seem like you don't have too many? If so, you're going to want to consider why. Have you been aggressively pruning? If you have, maybe give it a break for a little while to let some more leaves fill in so they can provide some extra shade in the afternoon for your tomato fruit. It's also possible that your plants are losing leaves for more nefarious reasons. So check out your plants for signs of pests and disease. Do you see any signs of little critters that might be munching on your leaves? What about diseases that cause wilting or curling of leaves? Defoliation caused by pests and disease is another reason why your tomatoes might not be getting the shade that they need from the sun every once in a while to help prevent sunscald. Technically, if you have a sun-scalded tomato that's large and ripe enough, it's still safe to eat. Just remove the sun-scalded portion and you'll be fine. But if it's an underdeveloped tomato or you see signs of mold or decay, it's best to just take that and pop it into the compost. When it comes to pests on your tomatoes, most signs are relatively easy to identify. I came out into the garden yesterday and noticed that I had a tomato starting to ripen. Excitedly, I knelt down to check it out and get a closer look. And that's when I saw it. Some critter had been nibbling on my tomato. Rabbits, squirrels, birds, and others might take the opportunity to taste test your tomatoes before you get a chance to. Tomato and tobacco hornworms might chew on your fruit in such a way that actually makes it look like a larger critter did it. To find these pests, look for any frass on leaves or fruit, and then look directly above it. Chances are, you'll find your culprit. And if you find any little holes in your tomatoes, take a closer look. You might just find a tomato fruit worm camping out and chowing down. And if you notice a white or yellow marbling on the surface of your fruit, chances are stink bugs have been visiting your tomatoes. Now, I don't recommend trying to salvage any of these fruits for consumption. If you see signs of pests, just toss them in the compost. One of the most common fruit rots in tomatoes is called Anthracnose. This is caused by a fungus, and what it does is it creates small, soft, sunken spots in the surface of your tomato fruit. As it sits, that spot grows larger, and it rots out and develops fungal spores in the center. Anthracnose most commonly impacts over-ripened tomatoes. So keep an eye on your tomatoes on the vine and make sure that you pluck them at peak ripeness. Don't let them go over. It's also soil-borne, so if you have tomatoes that rest on the soil, or perhaps with watering some soil kicks up and touches the tomatoes, those are going to be more susceptible to contracting anthracnose. It's also seed-borne, so you definitely don't want to save any seeds from any fruits that have been infected by this fungus because it'll pass it on to the next generation. To manage anthracnose, lay some mulch at the surface of your tomato plants. That'll keep the soil from being able to splash up onto your tomatoes, potentially infecting them. You also want to make sure that you're picking your tomatoes at the right time. Don't let them sit on the vines and over-ripen. And if you notice any signs of anthracnose during the growing season, at the end of the year when you clear your plants, you're probably just going to want to toss them into waste collection. Unless you do hot composting, and you can be sure that you can get a consistent temperature in your compost pile of at least 120 degrees Fahrenheit or 49 degrees Celsius for at least 2 weeks. Otherwise, when you clear your plants, you don't want to put them in compost. Just toss them. Now, there are other conditions that cause blemishes on tomatoes, but these are some of the most common that you'll find in the home garden. Take care to walk the garden every day and notice the signs so you can address them quickly. Some of them are purely superficial. They might not be beautiful, but you can pick and eat with confidence. Others, be careful. They could be a sign that there are more serious issues going on in your garden. Happy growing.